Hello, and thank you for joining us today for the webinar titled Data Privacy and Other Clinical Data Management Challenges. I'm Shonali Paul, COO at cloudlimbs.com. I'm here to moderate this event. Marion Henderson is joining us today as the presenter. She's the Senior Advisor on Biobanking to the NCI Center for Global Health and the Senior Advisor for Division Resources, DCEG. She's a founding member of the NCI Biospecimen Coordinating Committee, established by the NCI Biorepositories and Biospecimen Research Branch, and participated in the development and revision of the first and second edition of NCI's Best Practices for Biospecimen Resources. Since 1999, she has been a member of ISBR and served as the ISBR President 2011-12. Marianne is currently the chair of the ISBR Organizing Advisory Committee. For more details, please visit the Biography tab at the top of your screen. Marianne, I would like to extend a warm welcome to you. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that this event is interactive. We encourage you to participate by submitting as many questions as you want at any time during the presentation. To do so, simply type them into the Ask a Question box and click Send. We will take as many questions as time permits. Due to time constraints, if you're unable to answer your question today, we will answer them offline. If you have trouble seeing or hearing the presentation, click on the Support tab found at the top right of the presentation window, or report your problem by clicking on the Ask a Question box located on the far left of your screen. It is time now to hand over the floor to Marianne. It is over to you.
Hello, I'm Marianne Henderson and I work at the U.S. National Cancer Institute. I'm glad you're accessing this webinar on data privacy and other clinical management challenges. Today we'll focus on several areas: why laboratory data management is important, regulations and guidelines around data management challenges for clinical research laboratories, and tools and tactics for privacy and security. Management of data in research is in the spotlight. There's an emphasis on high quality, meaning minimizing errors and missing data, while maximizing the data generated in the lab. Laboratory data should be available to be shared, both in the context of interoperability and regulatory compliance. The goal is being able to combine and use data to affect clinical care in the future. Proper data management is important. Doing it well is expensive. The cost of doing it loosely is high. Almost daily, we hear that the latest database hack with banking or credit card or maybe social security numbers being vulnerable and in the hands of hackers. Increasingly, laboratory equipment is networked and workstations are linked to the internet, bringing more security threat. There's a demand now for continuous security monitoring to keep data safe. Laboratory managers need to be knowledgeable about security threats and privacy regulations that impact their clinical research laboratory. And you should be aware of the technological solutions that address security and privacy threats to your data systems. You should have a plan to guard against threats, whether they're intrusions, environmental disasters, or human errors. There are many regulations and guidelines that govern the management of data, how it's collected and controlled, stored, shared, and potentially destroyed. Here are some U.S. examples. We won't really have time to go through them specifically, but feel free to look them up. Because we're in an era of data sharing and the need to combine data sets from other areas of the world, you must also understand the regulations and guidelines in those parts of the world. Here are some examples of regulations and guidelines for privacy and data security and human subject safety in Europe. While I don't think most laboratory scientists see themselves as informatics experts, unfortunately, we can't just stick our heads in the sand. Focusing in on data management challenges within the clinical laboratory, there are several considerations. Providing accurate and timely data. If assays are performed in several locations, there also must be a harmonization of processes so that data is comparable and reproducible. Accurate and valid data enhances specimen analysis and interpretation. Accurate data produced from fewer rounds of testing also reduces costs. In turn, harmonized laboratory operations following industry best practices to produce accurate data is more cost-effective and efficient. Expanding the influence of staff through successful patient care or research finding. The opportunity is how to manage all of these challenges with a mind toward securely protecting the data being produced by your laboratory. As a data manager for a clinical lab, these are tasks you must manage. Managing massive amounts of data generated from the laboratory, sharing your data with other systems or other databases inside and outside of your organization. Compliance with regulatory and privacy demands with traceability. Ethical and cultural protections for the patients or participants' private information, and real-time tracking of results being produced in your laboratory or your organization. Is there really a threat to poor data management? Well, here are two examples that say yes. These are examples of breached data systems. Malicious or not, it was the result of poor data management and protection. Each of these were expensive to fix and allowed the private data from millions of patients to be exposed outside of their healthcare systems. These breaches also damaged the reputation of the organizations. To summarize, there are several areas to consider in data management. From understanding and complying with regulations, to protecting privacy and data security, to integrating data throughout your systems, and data analytics and resources. These are a lot to consider. So what can be done? So here's some tools and tactics for privacy and security. Let's talk about solutions. There are laboratory information systems to safely manage laboratory data. They come in many varieties. Some are developed in-house with expertise, some are open source, and some are commercially available to set up and go. To make the right decision to cover your needs for a system, your needs must be assessed in several ways. We'll go through these items later in the talk, but they include a privacy impact assessment or a PIA, privacy engineering, operations assessment, as well as learning from others. Whatever system you choose to evaluate for your needs, you need to make sure that that vendor or that developer demonstrates how the system effectively handles the security and privacy of your data. Also, where will the data be stored? Will it be stored locally, or will it be stored in the cloud? More and more systems and tools and data are being stored and aggregated in the cloud as we're moving into the era of big data. If choosing a vendor offering a cloud-based solution, make sure to understand their data security operations, auditing practices, and access control. Some considerations for data security in the cloud include: how are users identified and authenticated, and how are users kept out? What access controls are in place, and who can have access? How does the security policy protect against malware? How is software distributed? What systems controls are implemented? How is the data backed up? And what happens if there's an incident? A laboratory informatics solution should help you achieve data privacy and security through role-based access, through audit logs, through password controls, through session management, through encryption and backup protocols, and intrusion and malware detection mechanisms. Now we'll talk about more of the assessment tools. A privacy impact assessment, or PIA, must be carried out on a system to determine whether the data being collected complies with privacy-related legal and regulatory requirements. They look at your scope definition of all the activities that you're doing. They analyze the flow of data from one point to the endpoint, and they analyze the privacy implications of your activity and proposed system. And they document the assessment steps to follow up with risk mitigation. PIAs are very commonplace in data systems and shouldn't be ignored. Privacy engineering is an emerging discipline within the software and information systems domain. It aims to provide methodology, tools, and techniques such as engineered systems that provide acceptable levels of privacy. Starting with foundational privacy principles, they look into the process management and governance of that activity, and the tools and techniques and ontologies as well being used. An operations assessment is an evaluation of the effectiveness and suitability of a system, a fit-for-purpose evaluation of the adequacy and reliability of the system for its intended operations. Is your whole organization operations set up for safeguarding the data you're collecting? The results of this assessment may require somewhat drastic measures for mitigation, such as business re-engineering, organizational realignment, significant management commitment. These are not cheap to do if you are not set up for privacy and keeping private data, and development of new or revised procedures. As well, as painful as it can be, you can learn from others' mistakes so that you don't repeat them. Here are some not to be repeated. You don't want to fail to train employees on privacy and security issues and procedures. You don't want to fail to get approval for systems to be launched in your network or organization. Don't misconfigure to produce data and system vulnerabilities, open doors for hackers, and failing to set up in place procedures and policies for privacy and security in your organization. These are all definite no's. So in this webinar, we covered why you need to focus on laboratory data management, to be more productive, to use data to gain insights, to manage data in a safe and productive way, to do it according to regulations, and to manage the 4 or 5 V's of data. These are volume, variety, veracity or trustworthiness. You definitely want to have your data trusted. And velocity, the processing frequency, and value. Where will your data lead you in discovery or clinical care in the future? The various regulations and guidelines you need to be aware of for specific data management activities were covered, and the challenges associated with clinical and research laboratory data management. And lastly, the tools and tactics for privacy and security, with steps to assess your current operations while modifying them to meet your privacy needs for your data. Thank you. Now we can take a few questions.
Thank you, Marion, for the presentation. We are now ready to begin answering the questions submitted during today's presentation. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the chat box. We'll answer as many of your questions as we have time for. We have a number of interesting questions, so I will move straight into these. The first question is, what are your recommendations for improving data quality?
My recommendation to improve data quality is to first focus on good study design for the research questions that are to be answered by the study. Strong study design and the appropriate data analysis are very important components to achieving and improving data quality. Ensuring effective data management is also essential to accurate data collection, entry, reports, and validation.
Could you elaborate some of the best practices for clinical data management?
Clinical data management is complex and an ever-changing landscape, and 3 best practices in this area include knowing where your data is coming from, the types of data, and the people responsible for the data that you are managing. Develop a robust data management plan to delineate governance of the data. Who is the owner and who can provide access to the data? Depending on the data, access may be regulated by HIPAA or high-tech privacy and security requirements. Knowing how long the data can be stored, if that is regulated, is also important. If you have several systems that are providing data in your organization, it is important to find a solution to connect the disparate silos of data to get the most value from it. There are many more operational best practices, but these are a few of the most important.
How do you define high quality data? In which ways can it be achieved?
Data is high quality if it is fit for its intended uses in operations, decision-making, and planning. Alternatively, data is deemed of high quality if it correctly represents the real-world construct to which it refers. I previously mentioned ways to improve data quality.
Usually, data gets lost in silos. How should organizations address this issue?
Organizations should attempt to connect their silos of data to maximize their use by enabling interoperability between their systems. Some organizations have done this through creating central data repositories, while others have created federated systems that can be queried across the systems.
With the advent of EU GDPR, what are the implications for informed consent and maintaining data?
The EU GDPR is focused on the personal privacy of data emanating from persons in the European Economic Area. This regulation governs the transfer and use of that data within and outside of the EEA. Currently, the territorial reach of the EU GDPR is being clarified, especially in terms of international research and data sharing outside of the EU. I am sure we will hear more and understand more about the implications for informed consent and maintaining data associated with the EEA.
How should organizations address missing data?
I am no expert in this area of missing data, but there are a few general ways that I could point to. It could be that the participant or patient with missing values is deleted from the final analysis data set. If there is a way to recover the values that are missing from a participant or patient, maybe that is an option. Maybe recontacting. Or maybe there are also ways to impute or substitute the missing values. This is definitely the most I know in this area and should be discussed with a biostatistician.
Unfortunately, the time is up for today. Before we go, I would like to thank you for joining us. Questions we did not have time for today, and those submitted during the on-demand period will be answered via the contact information you provided at the time of registration. This webcast can be viewed on demand for the next 6 months. LabRoots will alert you via email when it's available for replay. We encourage you to share that email with your colleagues who may have missed today's live event. The webinar recording will be uploaded on the CloudLimbs website as well. Have a great day ahead, and thank you.